Hi, and greetings, and welcome to our introduction to Taoism and Confucianism. This unit will be looking at two different religions. Taoism sometimes is spelled Taoism with a T and sometimes with a D, but it is pronounced as if like Tao, like some of you have heard of like Dow Chemicals or Dow Rod or something like that. That's sort of the kind of that D noise. And the case is that we'll be looking at those two religions and Confucianism. The idea here, these are both religions of China. They're both fairly influential and large religions in China. Although what's interesting is you wouldn't find a whole lot of people who probably, if you ask somebody like, are you a Confucian? You would probably find a lot of people saying yes in China. As a matter of fact, maybe not, maybe not everybody, but I mean a large percentage. And of course, that's somewhat changed because of the fact that communism, has eliminated religion in Asia, but the or in China itself, but a large number of people would probably say yes, they're a Taoist, and yes, they're a Confucian. And they would claim to be both, and they wouldn't see any irony or any contradiction within that. Within the West, we tend to have an idea of like a law of non-contradiction. The idea that you can't be both something and not something. Or you can't be both a Christian and a Jew. You can't be both a Christian and a Muslim, or Christian and Confucian, or Christian and Buddhist, because some of these religions contradict. They're not the same thing. How can you have those? Well, within Asia, there isn't that sort of issue, that you can be both a Buddhist, a Confucianist, and a Taoist. As a matter of fact, there's sort of a saying within the Eastern tradition or within Chinese tradition, that most Chinese are Confucius in their daily life, they're Taoists in their personal life, and they're Buddhists at death. That as they reach the end of their life, they become Buddhists. And so the idea here is that you can have these different philosophies, these different rules, these different religions that influence and guide how you live different aspects of your life. And they don't see any contradiction or issue. And for Westerners, we find that very odd, but at least for the Chinese, that's perfectly acceptable. Now, the only other thing I'll say is about this is sort of that contradiction, and this is a little bit of mixing perhaps my my examples, but within Hinduism, there's an old story about three blind men, and these three blind men are shown an elephant, and so each one is led up to the elephant, but each one is led to a different part and only allowed to touch that part of the elephant. And so the first one goes to the trunk, the nose, and touches it and feels it, spends some time and thinks about what it is, and they say, well, what is it? And he says, well, I guess an elephant is like a fire hose. He says, okay. So the next one goes up, and he's handed a like one of the legs, and he touches the leg and he feels it, and it's very this very tall skinny thing that he goes, it's like a tree trunk, it's like part of a tree. And they said, okay. And then the third one is given the tail, and he touches it and he feels, he says, it's like a snake, it's like a rope or a snake. He said, that's what it is. It's like some sort of snake. And so they're each given a different part, and they all each come to a different conclusion. Well, the tradition holds that, or this analogy says, we're all like blind people in this world. We're all limited to this world. We don't see God himself. We don't see the whole. All we are is blind people who are given one aspect of God. We're allowed to touch the nose. We're allowed to touch the leg. We're allowed to touch the back or the trunk or whatever, the tail. And each of us touches a different part. And each of us comes and we feel that part, and we then say, what is God? And we each come to a very different conclusion. And even though these may seem contradictory, even though these may seem to be giving a concept, well, God is like a tree, well, God is like a snake, that these seem to be contradictions, that each of these is in fact touching the same thing, but we are all limited in what we can see. And so for the Westerner, for the Easterners, for the Asians, the idea here is that you can follow Taoism and it may take you to one part of what God is. And you may follow Confucianism, and it takes you to another part of what God is. And all of them, while giving very different ideas, giving very different approaches, very different influences, are all talking about the same thing, about the divine, about something that is greater than them, something that we cannot see because we as humans are blind. We are limited in our perspective, and we will not be able to know the divine. We can only know what we can learn from one part. And so there is no contradiction, there is no thing. And so all of these, in some ways, are intermixed. And even though they give very different concepts, very different approaches, they are all touching and experiencing the same thing.